Hello there, and welcome back to The Closet Historian and back to my sewing room for another beaded brooch project. As many of you will have seen here on the channel and over on my Instagram, I can't stop making beaded and embroidered beetle brooches. I've made a few moths as well. I will put the cards, or put links in the cards to both my moth video here on the channel and the beetle video, because I've shown how I make both of those. But then over my kind of Christmas break, I was experimenting with going ahead and making a big giant spider brooch as well, and many people requested to see how I was making the spider, and it's basically the same techniques that I was using on the other beaded brooches, but I have added a few new different types of beads into my arsenal for this as I keep playing with these. And as you can see, all my materials are actually still out here on my desk because I'm in the middle of yet another beetle here on my desk, and I didn't even bother to clean up to be able to talk to you today. But seeing as I just can't stop making these, let's jump on in and I'll show you how I've been making my spiders. And here we are above my desk. It's kind of an odd angle, but you know, it's all right. So I have a little piece of like craft felt here, and I'm just going to draw on a sort of teardrop. It almost looks like a little like perfume or potion bottle kind of shape here. So it's got this little like head and then like teardrop shape of the body. And this is rather a large size, of course. These would be faster to make if you made them a little bit smaller, but I want a giant spider brooch because it's me. So I'm just going to go ahead and start beading the entire head of this, or beading and sequining, I suppose. And I'm just using the same technique that I've been doing for a lot of sequining, if you've been watching me make things over the past, I don't know, decade, where I pick up a couple of sequins and then pick up a bead and then go back down through just the sequins. That bead kind of holds the sequins onto the surface of whatever I am beading. I'll use this on various items of clothing or all of these brooches, jewelry, hats, whatever I need to sequinify, I will use this technique. So pick up a couple of sequins. Here I'm layering two sequins that are slightly different sizes. So I have a size 6 and a size 4 sequin here. And I'm layering like a pearl colored sequin over a clear sequin just for another little bit of effect, mixing textures here. And then I have an opaque size 15 glass seed bead that I'm using to hold these on. And I'm just going to go around filling in the entire head of my spider here. This is kind of my nod to spiders having so many eyes, is doing this where it has so many beads covering the whole thing. But I don't really make these very anatomically correct, as we know. It's much more about a fantasy version of a bug, or a spider in this case, than anything actually real, because the real ones can be quite terrifying for us. They can be quite beautiful occasionally, until you get too close and you zoom in, or they get too close. It's not okay. So I'll stick with the fantasy versions for now. But I've beaded and sequined the entire head now, and I'm going to go ahead and take some embroidery floss and do French knots all around the outline of the rest of the body here. So I'm going to mix colors again, like I like to do with embroidery floss. So I have like an optic white, like a true white, an off-white, and then like a darker ivory here, so that I can incorporate both ivory and white in this, so that I can wear this brooch with either later on. So I want to have like bright white beads and also ivory colored beads in this. That way it matches both, if that makes any sense. But I'm just using French knots again to go all the way around the outline here. Sometimes I twist the needle to help it through the felt here if I'm doing them quite tightly close together. And you just wrap the thread around your needle 1, 2, 3 times, and then go back down right next to where you came up out of the fabric. Twist a little bit to bring the needle through to the other side, and keep going. Of course, putting them right next to one another so they nest kind of next to each other, and I can go all the way around like so. Then I'm going to try and pad up this little guy a little bit so he has more of a rounded body here. So I've got a couple pieces of felt that I can kind of graduate the size of the middle of this, and then I'm just using the rest of that embroidery floss to roughly stitch this down. All of this is going to be covered by beads and sequins, so none of these stitches will be seen. It's just to kind of pad this body up. You could do more layers if you wanted it to be very rounded. You could skip this if you wanted it to be flat, you know? It's up to you what you do for your spiders. And it's kind of fun if everyone's spiders look different. It's like different breeds of spiders, you know? I haven't tried any other shapes yet. This is the only kind of style I've made so far for spiders. But as I keep trying different things with the beetles, I will probably keep trying different things with the spiders as well. Just because it's very fun to experiment with these. And I like looking at shiny, pretty beads, you know? It's like, you know, the way some people collect nail polish or eyeshadow. Same idea. I kind of collect beads now too. They're all such pretty colors. I will have linked below, by the way, my 2 favorite bead shops on Etsy, my favorite source for sequins, and then I've just been getting my embroidery floss at Michael's Crafts. So those are all my sources, basically. And then for beading the body of this, I'm just going to take some polyester Gutermann thread on a beading needle here, or as I've been calling them, a beetle. And then I have these square I think they're called tila or tila beads. They look like little tiles, and they have 2 holes in them, so you can stitch them on like almost in a brick pattern kind of, and they look like tiles. These are Miyuki beads. They're made by Miyuki in Japan. They are a little bit more expensive, these tila ones, but they do lend a very cool, almost like klimped kind of look if you use them like staggered. Kind of looks like a blocky klimped painting, if you know what I mean. So I'm going to sew a few of these Picasso black ones down. The finish on a seed bead or a bead like this, where it's got like almost like a faux antiqued painted finish on it, is usually called a Picasso finish on a bead. So if I'm looking for beads like this, I usually search Picasso in a bead store, and then the different versions will come up. But these black ones have like a little bit of white paint on them, kind of gives them a mottled look that I quite like. So I'm just going to thread those on. So I'm threading these on like down the middle of this teardrop shape, and I'm staggering the beads a little. You can see these have like a left and a right hole in the bead, and so I'm staggering that so that I can have a sort of brick pattern going down the center of this eventually. And I'm using these tiny little 4th tila beads, which are the tiny black ones, and then I have the half tilas are the or tila, however it's pronounced, are the white ones here, or they're kind of like an off-white ivory color, and then I have the full tile in the black and white. And so I'm just doing a full line of these, and then I will couch these down just like I would any other bead. You've seen me doing a lot of beading here on the channel, where I just will do a line of beads like this, and then I go back along that line of string or line of thread in there and couch it down with little stitches to the fabric underneath. So that's basically how I'm doing all of my beaded beetles, and how I've been working on the moths as well. Same technique here for the spiders. And I've just threaded on some tiny size 2.5mm sequins here, using those almost as beads at the end of this. And those are a nice like iridescent ivory color, which helps bring a little bit more ivory into this as well. Again, and so I'm just going to use a little bit more of those, come up the other side of the tilla, and then feed on those other beads so that it looks, again, like kind of a brick pattern. You see what I'm saying? You could do a whole subway tile, one of these. If they had like a good green subway tile color, I would totally make, or like even a burgundy, you could make them look like themed after tube stations. If you have ever been to London, you know what I mean. Different tube stations have different colors of nice subway tile, and I have always admired them. Although tube stations tend to be quite dirty places, but for some reason I always like the tube and I miss it. So, you know, I guess it's because we have zero public transport of any reliability here in the United States, or especially here in Colorado. So I'm just going along here and again couching all that first kind of middle row of things down with little stitches over the joins in the beads, I guess. Hopefully that makes any sense. And then I will go ahead and start filling in this other side. I do have some other materials here that are new to my my beetle beading, and I have this pearl thread. This is bouillon thread, basically. It's for goldwork embroidery. This is not actually real gold, but it's very fine wire that's been wound into a little coil, and it is kind of springy, so you can kind of scooch it together or pull it apart if you want to. You can use this in many ways. But I found a really good resource for this stuff on Etsy, so I will link that below as well with my other material resources, just because this shop has a ton of different colors and you can order quite small quantities if you'd like to experiment with this stuff. And goldwork embroidery is quite fun in itself, but I liked incorporating these threads, mixing them in with the beads and the embroidery floss, just add another texture. This is what I'm using here is called... Can't speak. This is what I'm using here is called check pearl, which is quite sparkly because the spiral of the wire is kind of square, so it has a lot of shine and sparkle to it. So I added some gold, like light gold check pearl into this one as well, just so that I could wear it with other gold jewelry and feel like it matched, because I love things that are matchy-matchy. But again, I'm just filling this in, again, kind of imagining, without like looking at a klimt painting, but kind of imagining that like mix of little graphic shapes filling in to create something. So I was using some of the tilla beads, some regular seed beads, larger and smaller seed beads, sequins mixed in with that. So I'm just mixing and matching my materials as I go along here, and kind of deciding on the fly, like on a whim, what I want to do next, and just fitting them in together. And like especially with the tilla beads, using the like the left and right side of the bead like that, I can stagger them and lay them down like bricks. And if there's any spaces in here, the bouillon thread is actually very good for filling in tight spaces because you can kind of wedge it in there with your nail. If you're like me and you have natural nails, I feel like if you had acrylics, it might be a little bit harder to do that, but I can kind of wedge in and fill in very narrow spaces with that pearl because it bends a tiny bit if I needed to. But I'm just doing a line of beads, stitching it down. You can see here I have a very thin little tiny gold tila bead in there as well. But I'm just making the pattern up as I go. I'm not looking at anything. Obviously this is not referenced after an actual spider because no spiders look like this. And thankfully, I don't think any spiders look like this that are this giant because goodness. Of course, you could use that same like technique that we used on the moth brooches to make them furry. You could do that for the spider as well because there are plenty of furry spiders. But I was going for more of a tile, look, a spider made of tile this time. And I did want to do something in a lighter color that would show up against black clothing because as much as I would like a sparkly black spider, it would blend in quite well to anything I wear. So I wanted to make something black and white. That way I could wear this with white accessories and like on a black dress with white accessories in the future with like a white hat, white gloves, you know. It's a very common accessory color in vintage. Here I have some black bouillon thread as well. So I can use sparkly black and incorporate that in as well. But if you're wondering what I have on in the background of this, I was actually watching someone play through the video game Cyberpunk because I can't play video games and my computer actually cannot handle a game like Cyberpunk, but I would really wish I could play it. And I still want to see the Cyberpunk story because, of course, as we know, I'm a big lover of Blade Runner and I quite like Cyberpunk media in general. So that's what I had on in the background here, is someone playing through Cyberpunk. If I upgrade my PC this year, I may give it a try. I'm really quite bad at video games, but I'm also very bad at relaxing and it could be good for me. Although this is how I've been relaxing lately, is by beading these things. And here I am thinking, there's a little bit of space, let me try and fill that in with a little bit of this bouillon. But yeah, there's not really a pattern for this. I'm just randomly filling it all in, doing it by feel, and what strikes me in the moment, basically. There are some really cool, like, mixed color threads like this, like the 2 different colors of wire mixed together even. I just finished making a beetle with the green and purple mixed colored bouillon thread as like the inspiration for the rest of the colors. So I mixed purple and green for the whole thing, and that was very fun. So yeah, I really can't stop making these. I've had a couple of questions about people asking me, from people asking if I was going to put these into my Etsy shop or if I'm going to start selling them. Not right now, probably maybe in the future. But for now, I'm really enjoying having a hobby that is like just a hobby for now. So not currently. I don't plan on selling them anytime soon, I suppose. I'm sure I will at this point, I'm getting to the point where I've made too many to keep. So I will put some of them in my shop eventually, but just not anytime soon because I'm enjoying making them as like a break from work as opposed to making them as work, if that makes any sense. And though these tila beads are a little bit more expensive, I've really been enjoying using them for these, so it's a shame that they're on the pricier side. I think they're quite trendy right now, which is a shame. But here's my little spider all finished up, all beaded, the entire bottom. If you, like, the more you squeeze in the beads, the more it starts to curl on its own, by the way. So like if you really squeeze rows of beads in there, it starts to get like too full and there's not enough space for them. I was drinking coffee at this point, by the way. I had been beading probably for a good 4 hours to get to this point, like 3 or 4 hours to bead this much. But I decided to add as a finishing touch here, a little bit more metallic, a little bit more of the check bouillon thread here as a sort of necklace collar dealio between the head and the body of the spider here. And I wanted to mix both gold and silver for this so that, again, I could wear this with either color of metallic in my other accessories. So just mixing those in and stitching on long rows of this. You just use this almost as if it were a long, flexible bead, by the way. It is kind of delicate. You kind of have to be delicate with it, especially if you're using long pieces like this that you aren't going to couch down. But that's usually how this is used. It's like used on the surface, almost like a bead, and then you couch it down with small stitches over it. But at this point, it was time to start cutting tabs around my excess felt here and folding the tabs to the inside and stitching everything down. Of course, I can put additional pieces of felt in here to sort of pad this out and really create a quite rounded shape. Or if you want, you can kind of flatten this. It's up to you how 3D you want these things to be, but the felt is quite malleable, so you can kind of decide. But I'm just using the spare pieces of felt to fill this little buddy in and kind of stack them up. And it's like a tiny beaded stuffed animal at this point. So I'm just filling it in with tiny pieces of felt. I'm just going to be doing very rough stitches over this, by the way, just very much a structure thing as opposed to something that's going to be pretty, because all of this will be covered up and unseen later. So I can just throw this, you know, as many tiny pieces of felt as I want in here and then stitch it as messily as I need to, just to get the right shape going and to have it all feel secure, I suppose. So I'm not really caring about the looks of it at this point, because all this is going to be covered by additional layers later on. And I do have a couple of rather bent silk pins sitting here to help me do this kind of thing. Hold it together while I make my stitches. And these do take me about a full day to make, by the way. I would say maybe around 6 or 8 hours. I haven't really timed it, but they take like a full work day to make one of these spiders. So that's again why you won't be seeing many of them in my shop anytime soon, because I have to spend my full work days working mostly, as opposed to making spiders all the time, of course. So here I'm going to start making the legs in the same process here that I've used to make the legs on the beetles. It's just the legs are much longer. I wish I had a wire that was this thin but much stiffer. So if any of you know what that would be called, like I think this is a gauge 24 or 26 wire. It's very thin so that I can use tiny beads on it, but it is quite flexible, whereas I would like something that was a lot stiffer so that I could bend it into the shape and then not worry about it coming out of shape. So if you know a lot about wire, let me know. But once again, I'm using tiny, tiny seed beads, size 15 seed beads, and then also tiny, tiny sequins. These sequins are size 2mm sequins, I think. They're absolutely minuscule, but I'm just alternating them. One bead, one tiny sequin, one bead, tiny sequin for like 8 beads or so. And then I switch to a little bit larger bead and a little bit larger sequin and kind of gradate the size of my legs here until I get up towards the body with larger and larger sequins and beads, alternating those in a striped effect this time. Normally I'm using similar colors. Here I'm using, of course, opposite colors for a striped effect. I am using a matte black square-shaped 1mm Miyuki square seed bead for this. Again with those Miyuki beads. Miyuki? I think it's Miyuki. I don't remember. Again, my Japanese pronunciation is really not up to scratch, let's face it. Although I did spend a couple of months learning hiragana and katakana once, and of course I didn't keep up with it, and so now I have lost all that progress. So when I go to learn Japanese again someday, hopefully, I will be starting from scratch all over again. Dang it! But I'm making these legs about, I don't know, 4 inches long, quite long. You could make them shorter, of course. Not all spiders have long spindly legs, but mine do. But I'm just putting a little kink in the wire to hold those beads in place. And then I'm going to leave a bit of wire across the center here, bead the other leg, and then round off the end. So I'm just turning a little ring at the end of my wire to secure it closed. And then I like to stamp that flat, like so it looks a little bit hammered with my crimping tool here. So that's what I'm doing there. Again, the same method that I was using to make the legs and the antenna for my beetles as well, just making these long spider legs. And of course, they're just the shape, whatever shape the wire was right now, and we'll keep them that shape until the very end. So I'm just letting these guys hang out, very wide stance, until I have them sewn down, and then we will eventually bend them into the shape. But I, of course, have to make another 3 of these so that I can have 8 legs total. So I'll set that aside and make several more. And then before I sew the legs on, I want to go ahead and secure a piece of buckram, so I have something quite stable to sew this all onto the back of my beaded piece. So I'm just cutting a piece of buckram to size for the back of this. This is just hat making buckram. It's a stiffened cotton netting, or paper netting sometimes, but it's hat canvas basically for making hats. But I have spare pieces of it laying around that I've been using to make quite a few brooches instead. So again, I'm just roughly stitching that on, not worrying about my stitches being pretty, because again, it will be covered. So I'm just whip stitching that on real quick, and then I'm going to move some of my beads around because I was like, I should clean some of these up before I hit this table wrong and they all end up on the floor. It's always a hazard with me. I'm quite clumsy, so I'm just cleaning up some of my beads here. But then I'm going to start sewing these legs on. I kind of sewed them on where the junction between the head and the body of the spider are. That was just seemed to be the most logical place for them, I suppose. But I have to make sure that I start high enough that I have room for all 4 legs on each side. But I like leaving the bar across the middle and having the sets of legs like this, because when I bend the legs later, it helps each side stay stable that it's connected to the other side. Well, hopefully that makes any sense. So like, because it's all one piece of wire, it helps later when moving them around. Like if this was just like a turned little circle end and I was just stitching each of these on individually, I feel like it would be harder to get them to stay bent into the shape that I want. So it's nice to have the crossbar of wire across the body of the spider in the back there. I just think it helps with disposability later on. And I am just using a combination of like whip stitching these on and like a couple of like blanket stitches, kind of just knotting these on and securing them down. Again, it's nothing fancy. It's quite messy stitching, but it's just to be secure, not to be pretty, once again. And then once I have all my legs on, I can go ahead and really make sure they're all secured in there. And it'll look a little bit like this. Again, I haven't bent my legs into their final shape yet, but this is what they're looking like. I'm going to go ahead and sew on the pin back here. I like to sew through the entire body of the spider or beetle or whatever I'm working on. So I'm going to sew this longer pin back on through the entire body of this, hiding the stitches underneath beads, underneath sequins. You won't see them, but it means that this pin back is extremely secure on here, which is always nice. And then finally, once that pin back is on there, I will use one last piece of felt to cover up all that messy stitching I was talking about. So I have this piece cut to size, and then I'm going to mark on here where I need to have slits in this for the pin back openings. So like so I can have this really nice and clean in here. I'm going to put the pin back, like pin and secured side, through those slits, and then I have this little piece of felt that I can go ahead and go around and take nicer, well-spaced blanket stitches all the way around this little guy to secure this last piece of felt on the back to really clean up the look of the back and finish everything off nicely. It can be a little bit fiddly to get around all these legs at this point, by the way. It's thread will get caught on the legs all the time, which is why I don't bother bending them to the proper shape until after I'm done with this step, because it just seems silly. But now that I have my legs on, my pin back is on, everything is done, I can go ahead and bend my legs into the shape I would like. Of course, this is quite inspired by the spider ornaments, the ornament spiders that Christine McConnell makes. Christine McConnell, of course, being very inspiring in general, and all the things that she makes are just stunning. But she does her spider legs in a similar way to this, and I find them very pretty and elegant. So that's kind of what was inspiring me for the shape of these here. And I was just bending them up. The two top sets of legs, I guess, are bent up and then together, come to like a bit of a point, I suppose, and then the bottom leg's the same sort of way, but facing towards the bottom, so it creates kind of a little diamond shape. I assume many spiders hold their legs like this as well, but this is what was going around in my mind when I was thinking about these, is remembering those spiders that Christine McConnell made out of ornaments. That might have been on her Patreon, but I am a patron of hers because she's awesome. And if you don't know about her channel, do check it out. I will link it below for you. But just giving these little legs one last wiggle. Again, if you know of a good stiff but very thin wire, do let me know where I can get some. Let me know in the comments below. But here's my finished black and white spider, and I'm super happy with it. And here is my finished black and white cookies and cream colored spider brooch. I'm super happy with how this one came out. I really like the striped legs on it. I think it really gives it quite a nice graphic contrasting look against, of course, black clothing. I haven't made a black spider yet, or even an all black beetle yet, just because I wear so much black clothing that I feel like they would just blend in almost too much, so I wanted something that would stand out against my dark clothes. Thank you as always for indulging me in another crafting video today. I hope you enjoyed seeing how this spider came together. I think I will be making another one in blue and green soon, because I haven't made a blue one yet, and that could be quite fun. I'll of course be back here again soon with some more vintage sewing, costuming, and maybe even some more crafting real soon, so I will see you all then. Bye!